Hi, this is John Greiner with Basin Safety Consulting and Training, and this month we're going to be covering behavior-based safety training as well as job safety analysis training. And the goal of both of these is to really understand why we do what we do as individuals in the workplace, as companies. And to start that off, I want to tell you a little bit about why Basin Safety does what we do. So we are a company with a mission that everyone goes home safely to their families every day. And the way we do that is by pioneering excellence every day in the way that we communicate, the way that we work together, and the way that we support each other in our company. And that's done by putting people first. And then lastly, asking the right questions to ensure the best results. Sometimes companies and safety people will make decisions and ideas that they believe will make a company or group safer, but they don't ask the right questions to really understand if it's what a company needs. So we try to be different in that way to really understand what our customers and the people that we work with need. And once we take that data, we create customized training and consulting in the oil and gas, construction, and commercial sectors. We perform field services, field safety services such as gas calibration, H2S testing, etc. Product and equipment, sales, service, and rental, anything safety related, confined space equipment, rescue equipment, etc. We try to make that available to the market. And lastly, emergency management and services. So, we take the 24-hour calls, and if we can help with gate guard or securing a site, consulting on the best way to stop a blowout, or prevent injury from the workers, we're there to help. So that's a little bit about Basin Safety, so why we do what we do. And now we're going to get into a little bit of why you and our teams do what we do. So behavior-based safety is a process that helps employers and employees understand, identify, and choose safe behaviors over unsafe behaviors. And we really need to know obviously what an unsafe or safe behavior it is, but we also want to understand why someone would choose to do something unsafely. And typically when we're looking at that, we find that it's a time-based, pressure-based, either because of the job or a deadline, or just complacency-based. Well, I didn't think it would happen to me because, it hasn't happened before. None of those are good reasons to choose unsafe behavior. So the execution of an effective BBS or behavior-based safety program does require an above-average leadership team, safety culture, and communication strategy. It can't be done just by kind of going out there and, throwing something together. One of my favorite examples of this is just everybody out there who's listening to this video has helped somebody move at some time or another, whether it was your family, yourself, your cousin, mom, dad, cousin, sister, going to college, whatever. You helped somebody move. And if you've ever moved a couch through a doorway, this is the best scenario that I can think of. If you don't talk about, okay, look, this couch is this wide, we need to angle it, tilt it, flip it, kind of push it through at this angle and hold it and watch your hand. If you don't do that, you just pick up the couch and start walking towards that doorway. You're going to have to set it down. Someone's fingers are going to get smashed. Something's going to get broken. The wall's going to get damaged. So any of us who've, put a gash in a piece of drywall before while moving, we can attest to not planning effectively can cause, adverse results. And really, when we're moving, typically those can be small unless it's your back. But in the workplace, sometimes it can be big. So we want to make sure that we're effectively planning and communicating to make sure things don't happen. And that's part of a JSA as well. And that's kind of why these two are married together. So the worker, their capabilities is one thing we're going to look at. We're going to consider their experience, the extent of their training, their knowledge, and their responsibility level and maturity. You bring a new guy in who's never worked in the oil field and assign him to a complex task or a task that could go wrong if you don't do it in the right order and the right steps. You're just asking for trouble. And if it's somebody who's almost there and you put them out too early alone or without the right tools, they can fail. So really setting people up to ensure that they do the right thing. And that's what kind of when we're looking at the worker themselves, their knowledge level, history, experience base, it's tools, whatever. The environment looks at a wide variety of things, but in kind of just a nutshell version, existing or potential engineering controls, meaning physical things we can do to make the work safer, the equipment that they're using, the work tasks that they're doing, like what exactly are they doing today, the culture of that workplace, and the design or layout of the site. This picture here kind of has a good example of a lot of different things that could potentially go wrong and are going wrong. You got a ladder being used inappropriately by the scaffolding that is not approved scaffolding. You got a guy on top of that scaffolding, obviously performing work, not tied off, much higher than 4 feet. You got a couple guys on the relatively steep pitched roof, hauling up OSB, hanging over the edge of the roof, lifting up the OSB, with no rigging or, tie off at all. You got a guy below kind of not even paying attention to the fact that, hey, if that piece of OSB falls, I'm kind of in the line of fire here. You got a lot of things going on, and you got to ask yourself, why? I mean, really, why? Just, that's it. Why? Why would they do all these things that they're doing? And a lot of times it's not a good culture, not a good plan, not thinking it through. Hey, what's the worst case scenario? And we're going to look at that here at the end of the presentation. So, worker behavior, often overlooked. Last component here, why do people choose to do what they do? And behavior really is defined as the way in which one acts or conducts themselves towards others, and the way in which a person acts in response to a particular situation or stimulus. Now, why that's important is, I'm going to go back to our previous image here. It's if it'll let me, it's not just about how we do our jobs, but what happens if something goes wrong? Can we ensure that we do it the right way? And if a fire starts, if something falls, if somebody misses a step in a process, are we equipped to be able to effectively respond, whether through knowledge, training, experience, etc.? And so behavior is kind of a full encompassing what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what we would do in the event of an adverse condition. So the process that we use to identify the data in the behavior-based safety program, first of all, is getting data by observing. And then we review that observation, set goals, and reinforce those goals. Very straightforward. Now, and this is very important, and we're going to talk about some different strategies to do this. This image here is of an individual holding the clipboard, watching guys work in the corner awkwardly. This is one way to collect data. I'm not a huge fan of this method. I don't think that the guys working right there feel like this is a positive thing, even if it is. And the guy in the yellow hard hat is like, hey, this is a positive thing we're doing here. They're gonna be like, nah, man, you're just trying to, watch us to rat us out, or take our jobs or dock our pay or something. And the guy in the yellow hat may say, no, I'm not. I'm here to help. And they're not going to believe them, because if they do something extremely unsafe, it could be documented against them. And so for that first one, the behavior observation and feedback, the method in which we collect data, it is important. We want good data, but there's not just one way to get that data. It doesn't have to be a guy awkwardly on a hillside with a pair of binoculars writing down what he sees. There's other ways to do it, and we'll talk about that near the end in our team-based safety slide. So observation and feedback, once you get that data, what do we do with that data? It should be measurable, like, hey, we noticed that guys aren't wearing the appropriate equipment, or they're not lifting properly. They're kind of rushed on this job site, whatever. We got to kind of look at what it is, measurable, specific things. And then routine tasks are a big part of this too. Things that people are extremely efficient at and know how to do well and don't even really think about the task when they do it. Are there things that are negative in that behavior that they're just kind of skipping over due to familiarity? And then lastly, providing that positive feedback when, hey, you're doing this good, here's some positive feedback, and kind of figuring out how to do that. So reviewing the data, essentially what we do with the data is we look at negative and positive components, and we determine how to use that to effectively communicate hazards in the workplace, or negative behavior or positive behavior in the workplace. And the goal is to take that relationship between what we observe and what it looks like on the data side, and then use that for effective strategies to minimize the likelihood of an incident or an event. And then provide goals. So these goals should be basic, attainable, realistic, forward-driven. Hey, everybody has their PPE when they come out of the truck. We have the right tools for the job loaded in the truck. People have enough sleep before they show up to work. If driving is a big issue, or depending on the type of work you're doing, the goal should be simple, once again, and something that can be achieved. And if you have those, if you fail, like they say, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. Kind of an old adage, but it's true. It's realistic that if we're not creating goals, then people aren't going to be reaching for them. So you can have percentage safety goals, like for example, 50% reduction of incidents, 100% reduction of incidents, 75, whatever. You can have process goals. We want to improve how we do our jobs, or the equipment that we, right now we're using an older model of this tractor or a hand tool, Crescent wrench, an off-brand Chinese made. We're going to go to, Crescent or, a Napa version, whatever the goals are that make that job safer, specific task-wise or equipment-wise. And then lastly, implementation, what we're using to do our jobs, communicating better, stronger teams, better trained people, whatever they are. And that communication, and this is the problem with a lot of behavior-based safety programs, a lot of times it's the top-level individuals kind of, pointing the finger and shouting down at the, at the workers, the laborers, and telling them what they need to do better. And there's not a lot of feedback or even requests for feedback from the laborers on what they think is needed to do the job safer. But I think that's where the best data is found. That's where it's mined. So reinforcing these goals from the management level, as I mentioned earlier, it needs to be above average. You can't have management that is just kind of punching the clock and just, I'm in charge, so watch these guys do what they're doing. It needs to be a management level that's providing immediate positive feedback to encourage a safe behavior and culture. And there are different ways to reward behavior. Sometimes it's monetary, sometimes it's vacation or events, social events, parties, etc. But we should have a positive way to encourage people working safe on a consistent level. And then also, leading by example. And, the results that we found is increased efficiency, productivity, morale, and profitability if all those elements are kind of working together. And if your company doesn't have a strong behavior-based safety program, or if you're kind of working as a solo or a lone worker, there are ways to develop this. And it's really about the way that you do your reporting. You solo workers, I'm sure you have some sort of report. So talk about the things that you're seeing that are improving, or ways that the job site could be improved in a positive way, right? Because if you go to your manager and you're like, look, Bub, like, this is wrong, and you're a terrible manager, and you don't care about us. If you come at people hard like that, typically you're not going to get a soft response. So finding a positive way to massage that process forward, because people do want to do the right thing, and sometimes them not having the right equipment, tools, or culture is a result of just not knowing. And then if you feel like you do know, you find a positive way to communicate and educate. So if you have any questions about this portion, definitely put them at the bottom of our quiz section. We have that little feedback section. I will respond to any questions you ask. Looking forward to them. So go ahead and put them down in there. So as I mentioned, we're going to go over team-based safety. And team-based safety is something that we actually developed with some of our customers. It's identifying, this is a way of achieving data rather than the clipboard, guy in the corner. And it identifies specific tasks being performed. It reviews the JSAs. It identifies the teams performing the work. And probably one of the most important parts of this is it relies on a debrief component at the end of the shift. So the beginning of the shift, people get together, they do the JSA. This is what we're going to do today. These are the hazards and the mitigation. This is how we're going to make sure we don't do anything, and this is going to be the result. But then at the end of the day, everybody kind of clocks out, signs out, goes home, whatever. They don't debrief. They don't sit down and say, hey, what were our positive behaviors? What were differences from the plan that we had and the way that we executed their plan? What unsafe things happened, or things that we didn't account for or we couldn't control that occurred, and then documenting that as your data methodology rather than once again, the clipboard guy in the corner. And then using that data to update your SOPs, your job safety analysis, and even your plan for doing the next job. Hey, we did not have enough pipe wrenches to do this job. We were kind of scrambling and had to use a different method, or we didn't have enough lube oil. We didn't have enough pipe. We didn't have enough of whatever we needed, and therefore the job wasn't as efficient as it could have been, for example. So looking at this picture again, a little bit more blown up, just stuff sticking up, rebar sticking out of the ground, trash everywhere, just not a well-designed and planned. If these guys were to come to work in the morning and say, okay, guys, we're going to work. How do we make sure no one gets hurt today? I don't think they'd come up with this specific strategy. And then secondly, if at the end of the day they said, hey, were there any times you felt a little bit scared for your life? I'm sure that guy up there that's kind of tugging on that corner piece of OSB would have been like, I don't know, guys, that was pretty sketchy. Like, I was not feeling super confident about my safety at this moment. And then they can talk about it and say, oh, okay, what are we going to do tomorrow? Some other examples, in a kitchen, this is an area where a lot of people don't think about safety. You got stuff in front of the electrical, and it's flammable. Some of it, the cardboard there. You got Bubba with stuff out in the working area. You got the oven open. You got him reaching over for this heavy pot. Just a lot of things that don't seem to be taking safety into extreme consideration. Here we got probably a pretty common thing here. We got a couple guys working, doing different tasks. The guy on top is obviously not really utilizing good core body strength as he's moving that load into the truck. It looks like that is designed for that purpose, that man lift there. But, and you got the other guy working under there, hopefully not sticking his hand under there, but a couple different guys doing different tasks at the same time. Also, the chalk block that's pretty awesome. Here, we got some electrical work going on, being held up by a shovel there. But I'm sure those are rubber boots, so he's probably not at risk of electrocution at all. That's a joke. He's very much at risk of electrocution. And his buddy over there not really paying attention, touching something metal against a conics, which is metal, next to some wire that's metal. And then our forklift operator out there with his head outside of the cab. Just a lot of good things going on. This photo's courtesy of WorkSafe BC. Looks a little staged, but still a good example. And here we got a guy coming out from an underground hole, plastic gas can, obviously no hard hat. His air isn't moving. Obviously not utilizing his tripod or even a harness at all. A lot of different things here going on as well. Not positive. A couple more pictures here. Individuals working together, guy on his phone, doing work, other guy installing the propane without it being locked out, tagged out, engine, we got water going around, we got a lot of things going on, open electrical box, fire extinguisher on the ground, just a lot of negative things happening here. So once again, if you're the manager, the supervisor in these situations, asking your guys, hey, why are you standing on that milk crate there, Bubby? This is not the safest way to be, getting up there at the right height that you need to be. Why do we do things this way? Why don't we go find the right equipment? Does the company not have the right equipment? Do we not care to get the right equipment? What are the reasons? And then identifying those and working towards them. Another one here, looks like a home project. Just not the safest way to do work here in a lot of different ways. So speaking of not the right way to do work, I want to talk about job safety analysis a bit. So you probably already know, I'm going to do a brief review. If you don't know a lot about job safety analysis or haven't completed a lot, definitely put some information at the bottom. I'd love to talk to you about it, or you can hit me up. I'll put my contact information in the link as well, so you can get in a hold of me. But job safety analysis is designed to document specific potential hazards while performing a task or a group of tasks. Typically, they're performed by a team. You create mitigation strategies, and then you discuss them with the entire team. These should typically be led by supervisors or managers or people who are involved in the work and understand the work. You don't want the newest guy doing the JSA who doesn't fully understand the tasks. And for that reason, input is extremely helpful from all members who are doing the work to make sure that all the hazards are identified. And the goal, once again, is to identify those hazards. And lastly, the reason for all of that is to make sure everyone goes home safely to their family. Whether your family's your online video game club or your racquetball club, or you have kiddos running around, we want to make sure you get home safe to your family. And so here's an example of a JSA, very generic. First section is typically going to be where you're working, who you're working for. Second section, what equipment you need. Third section, what hazards do we know are out here? Do we have power lines? Is there enough light? Do we have to lift safely? Are we working at heights? Are there fall hazards? Is there ice, snow, gases, flammable gases, etc.? What are we looking at, right? And then your required conditions here, permit required conditions, going on to the next slide. Are we working in a trench? Are we doing hot work? Is there ground disturbance? Are we doing confined space work? Are we locking things out, tagging them out? Is there a hot tap? Just some basics. What are we looking at? And then the sequence of steps, the potential risks, and the actions taken to reduce the risk hazard. Sometimes when I read these JSAs, it'll be like, the first thing, sequence of basic job steps, rigging up, potential risks or hazard, danger, something could fall, actions taken to reduce risk hazard, pay attention. I mean, don't get me wrong, pay attention. That actually is a good way to reduce risks or hazards. But, when we're talking about specific hazards, let's say we're rigging something. Let's say we're rigging that OSB from that photo earlier. Sequence of basic job steps. Hoist OSB to rooftop. Potential risk or hazard. It could fall. It could slip. Somebody could fall or slip. Actions taken to reduce risk or hazard. Tie off the equipment, tie off the OSB, rig it appropriately, make sure the individual is tied off up top. Specific items to specific risks to specific steps in the job to make sure that we're identifying what could go wrong. And, you kind of go down the process step by step of, now these could be, I'm not going to lie, sometimes these can be involved and they can take long. They may take up to 20 minutes to do this work, to do an effective JSA. And my question for people who give me pushback on that, I'm like, look, is it worth it? If you prevent somebody from getting hurt and not going home to their family that day, would that extra 10 minutes have been worth it? And the answer is always yes. Whenever we look at accidents and incidents and an individual's been hurt and hospitalized, talking to the guys, no one's ever like, yeah, it was worth it. We saved 10 minutes, not doing that JSA appropriately. It was totally worth it. Never is going to be worth it. And then some other items, wind speed, direction, weather, temperature, are there other contractors on site? Who's on site? What's going on around you? All these things you want to identify. And then getting everyone's signature, of course. I also recommend having an evacuation plan, knowing where the nearest hospital and directions are, as well as the muster point, having a sign in case something happens. Everyone's got to run to the muster point, making sure that everybody who signed in on the beginning is there at the muster point. And the reason there's more signatures here than on the crew signatures is there may be other contractors on site. So identifying good hazards, as I mentioned, some tools for that are really identifying worst case scenarios. Some of you may be familiar with Murphy's Law. It's basically whatever can happen will happen, right? And so we want to look at all those little subtle things that could happen. So I like to ask two very basic questions. Number one, what's the likelihood of an adverse event happening? Is it low, medium, or high? What's the severity of that event if it were to occur? And I'm going to refresh your mind back to that image of the OSB again. What's the likelihood of that OSB falling the way that they were lifting it haphazardly? And you'd say, well, it's pretty high likelihood. Now, if that were to fall, or the individual holding it, if the wind were to gust up and he was holding on to it, what would the severity of him falling or that OSB falling onto people below or onto the scaffolding that's holding the guy up, what would the severity of that event be? A lot of people are going to say high. I'm going to go on the high. So we have a high likelihood and a high severity outcome of an event. That should drive decisions to change the way that we're doing things. And so to identify those hazards, we want to ask what could happen in a worst case scenario. What if timing was off? If we don't do this in the right pace, what if our distance is incorrect? Like, hey, you're standing too close to this thing, or you're right underneath it, or these two pieces of equipment are too close. You got to look at that. What if we had more people or less people? What if someone arrives and enters the work area unexpectedly? Someone who doesn't know what you are working on, or they walk into the wrong area or over pressurized lines or whatever. Weather changes, like I mentioned, with wind picking up, snow, rain. Does that change our job at all? What if tools fail? What if pressure increases or decreases? Do we have a strategy for that, or is everyone just going to run around like chickens with their head cut off if we lose pressure or increase pressure, etc.? So kind of tying all this together, I believe that the behavior-based safety program and job safety analysis should work together, because at the end of the day, once we've identified the hazards, the mitigation, and the job step sequences, at the end of that day, we want to ask ourselves, did we actually see those hazards, or were there other hazards that we didn't talk about? Let's talk about those now at the end of the job, and the next time we go to plan this job, we're going to talk about them. And then use that JSA analysis time to discuss the behaviors. Hey, we need to be patient here, right? Because the JSA is identifying physical hazards that we'll encounter, but then we also want to talk about and document the behaviors. We need to work at a measured pace. We need to make sure that we're talking well. We need to have a safe word for if something's falling. We need to have, if we see something unsafe, we need to be able to communicate that and what's the way to do it. If you're across a big location, for example, yelling as a means of communication isn't going to work, because any wind on a location that's 150 yards long, you're not going to be able to hear the guy at the other side of that location. So whether it's radios, hand signals, etc., all these sorts of things should be discussed during the JSA process. And then obviously during the job, we're looking out for safe, unsafe equipment, the way we're doing our job, the layout of the job, and then lastly, once again, behaviors, lack of knowledge or training, lack of stated process, communication processes, procedures, really looking at that. And then lastly, tools that we're using, and the environment, the culture. Hey, this guy was yelling all day and kind of had everyone on edge, and people were not working as effectively. Behaviors, things like that. So this is one data collection card method that's used out there. It's called a BOC card. It's customizable. You don't have to have these items on there, but its goal is to recognize specific types of hazards, whether safe or unsafe, and you can use this data in a variety of uses, but really looking at, are we experiencing unsafe acts, conditions, equipment? Are there safe things that we're seeing, unsafe things that we're seeing? Is it a chemical issue, a machine thing, a layout thing, a fire, noise, electrical, etc.? And then a little bit of, narrative at the bottom. And then lastly, using the data. So once we collect all this data and we figure it out, really we want to understand the type of hazard and the frequency of the hazard. And that's depending on how often we do a job, how many people are involved, etc. And then we want to use that to communicate to workers, hey, on this site or for this customer or when doing this job, these are the things that can go wrong. And then that data can be trended and used to proactively develop training. Hey, we notice a lot of issues with guys not wearing gloves, or our gloves aren't the right type of gloves to do the job that we're doing. We need to change something, right? And then train people to use the right type of glove. And all of this, and this is extremely important, and it doesn't always happen, it should be used as a lesson learned tool, not a pointing the finger tool. We're not trying to find guys that we're trying to axe or run off or have them drag up. We're trying to find safer ways of doing work that make our companies better, to make sure that everyone goes home safe every day to their families, to their kids, to their wife, to their grandma, to their mom that they're taking care of. Once again, their online video gaming community, it does not matter. We want to make sure that they're going home safe to the people that they care about. So with that's really the point of understanding our behavior at work, the way that we analyze the risk of our jobs and execute effective strategies to making sure that no one's getting hurt. So thank you very much for your time this month. Once again, any feedback, leave it at the bottom of the quiz. Look forward to your information, and you have a great afternoon and evening. Thank you.